But it's more than just sort of contemporary charismatic Christianity, right? This goes back through the Christian tradition. So you've written a bit on Beatrice of Nazareth, who, for those of you who might not know, she's a 13th century Flemish nun, am I right? A Cistercian nun?
Yes.
Yes. If you see this on the internet later, can you Google it for us and then get back to us?
And then just put it in the comments if I just got it wrong.
That's right. And so you write this in your book about just these power dynamics and the mix of desire with them. So on Beatrice, you write, Eucharistic starvation, bodily restriction and bondage, piercing her flesh with thorns. Beatrice is known for her ruthless asceticism. She pursued discomforting mixtures of desire and violence, pleasure and pain, and spirit unleashed through broken flesh that presage the Marquis de Sade's dungeons and serve as templates for contemporary communities of BDSM practitioners. 50 Shades of Grey pales in comparison to Beatrice's piety. You want to unpack that, Natalie Wick-Stevenson?
Morgan said we were going to start kind of slow. I'm really worried about what's coming in the second hour. Yeah, well, there is a tradition throughout Christian history among who we typically would refer to as mystics or ascetics, people who take on these extreme bodily practices to form their bodies in a way that are open, transcendent to divine presence. And they always used incredibly erotic language that often gets cleaned up in translations or cleaned up by sort of the parameters that get put around the text when it's published. But at the heart of these stories are people just yearning to the point of self-destruction for the divine. And I'm not saying everyone needs to be this way in the same way that, like, it's okay.
Don't try this at home.
But there are practices these people have taken on throughout history that do look like contemporary kink practices in many ways, and there's a lot of philosophical work done on trying to look at the similarities among these, that are disciplining the body into forms of transcendence that open awareness and connection with the divine. But I mean, even right now, I'm sweating a little talking about this because I'm like, well, actually, maybe a lot of people don't like to get smacked around in the bedroom or at the pulpit, right? Not everybody is into that, and not everybody has to be. But what intrigues me are the ways in which these certain kinds of practices throughout history have enabled people to transcend their own, let's say, bodily or self-coherence in ways that open them up to the inexplicable, unexplainable, unimaginable. And I don't think everyone needs to be doing that. I mean, this is why queer theology is less about inclusion and trying to sort of draw everyone into a normative way of being, and much more about seeking to disrupt what our norms are, to see when we do that, what kind of possibilities open up for how we might relate to God. And so it's always a bit, I'm like thrown off a bit because we've jumped straight into the BDSM and kink, which I thought we were going to sneak in at the end. But the idea...
Lay it all on the table.
It's right out there. The idea here being is that we have these kinds of ways of thinking theologically, of constructing our Christian practice, of approaching God, that are shaped by certain kinds of parameters of what we might call decency, what the theologian Marcella Altuis-Reed calls decency. And that if we want to really unlock our theological imaginations to open up new ways of encountering the divine, it requires becoming indecent in a certain way. And that attached to sexual decency also come certain ideas of economic decency, colonial decency. We can list all the things that us good liberals care about decency. They're all sort of connected with each other. And when you can break open the sexual story, you become able to also break open all these other stories as well, that, like I say, open our theological imaginations for the possible.